Welcome to The Shift Show with Adriana Bucci. Join me every week to learn all about narcissistic abuse recovery, healing from physical and emotional pain after the abuse, and everything else to do with toxic people and how they affect your physical, emotional, and mental health. And no, you are not the crazy one. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Let's get right to it. Hello, and welcome to episode number 34 of The Shift Show. This episode is going to be a solo episode. I plan on doing more of these. I know I have probably said that a few times in previous solo episodes, but for real this time, I promise. I'm gonna start sharing more of my story, and I figure why not? Because just why not? It's gonna help people, and it's parts of my story that I've not really shared, or I've shared in passing, so might as well make podcast episodes out of it. So why not? So today's episode obviously is going to be all about how I figured out that my mother was a narcissist. And I guess, I'm sure you've heard the episode already about what happens when a narcissistic parent dies. So I think, just to piggyback off of that a little bit, I guess also what happens after that is you feel more empowered to share more about your story. So I guess that's what's happening right now, which is awesome. And it does feel really empowering that I can actually publicly share this without the fear. And what's funny is, if you've noticed on my podcast, my introduction episode is the third episode when it should be the first one. And that's actually a funny story in itself, because my mother was obviously still alive at that time when I first made this podcast. I actually had a moment when I thought I was going to just cancel the podcast and, just maybe get rid of that episode altogether, which I did. I didn't delete it. I just took it off of the episodes, but it's still saved. Because I just randomly got paranoid that day, and this was back in February, I guess, that she was going to somehow find my podcast and then call me and yell at me. And, that was a fear that I had. So I allowed myself to process that fear. And once I did, I put the episode back up. But this happened, a couple days later. So that's why the introduction episode is episode number 3 when you look at it chronologically, but it was actually supposed to be episode number 1. So, that's, I guess, a great example of how I worked through the fear and did the thing anyways, and realized, even if she does find me, whatever, but at the same time, she was 76, barely knew how to use her email. So why would she even know what a podcast is? But, that paranoia always happens. And I feel called to share this right now in this episode because I'm sure that people struggle with this, especially adult children of narcissists or people who have broken up with narcissists. You just feel like they're going to find you, and then what's going to happen, right? And then your brain goes through all these things of all the consequences that are going to happen. And it's one thing to intellectually understand okay, if this happens, whatever, whoop-de-doo, not a big deal. So in my case, if she finds my podcast, what's she going to do? Yell at me? It's not like she's going to come over to my place and punch me out or something. It was just the getting yelled at that I was terrified of, because that's what terrified me as a child. She yelled at me a lot. And so, logically I knew that even if that does happen, I'm still safe, even if I'm being yelled at. But emotionally understanding it is what comes when you do the inner emotional processing. So I processed that fear, as uncomfortable as it was, right? But this is all part of doing the work. And this is literally what I teach my clients to do every single day, to understand that their emotions are normal and human and okay to be felt. And once you actually feel them, you are free from them and they get released. And there's literally nothing you need to do to release them. It's just by feeling them and letting it be there without judging it. That's the tricky part, without judging it. So that means without shutting all over yourself, without saying, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, or I should feel grateful, or I should feel love and light, and I shouldn't feel this, and this is putting me into a bad vibe, or all that fucking bullshit that we read on the internet and decide is true, that is a problem. So I think that, me sharing more of this and just keeping it real and sharing my truth is going to help people access their truth. And, like I always say, not to market myself, but if this is stuff that you struggle with, sign up for one on one coaching with me. You could be surprised at how quickly you can actually make a shift in your mindset when you know what to do, when you know how to deal with the emotional parts of it, right? Because it's easier said than done. And sometimes just a little guidance goes a very, very long way. And you can do the work on your own, right? Like you can totally do it on your own. Power to you. In the description of this episode, I'm going to put the link that I have on the link in my bio on Instagram, because that literally has all my resources. I have a free guided rage journaling exercise, which just walks you through how to rage journal. And that is a great way to start doing the inner work. So you can literally do this by yourself for free, right? And if you want the guidance, that's going to absolutely fast track you, right? But it's not like you need to pay somebody to help you. It's just if you want the help exists, and it's going to actually help you get through things much faster than if you're just relying on yourself and your own motivation, especially if you haven't processed that much. So, that option is always there, up to you if you want to take it. The link that I'm putting down will have links to every resource. So it's going to have the link to my guided free rage journaling exercise. It's going to have access to booking one on one coaching with me, and as well my new course that is launching on Monday, October 19th. So I'm actually running a sale on it before that launch date, which is ending on Sunday, the 18th. So hopefully you're listening to this before then, where you are actually going to be able to save $111 on my course, which is 50%, which is amazing. And I already priced it low already because I want as many people as possible to benefit from this course. Oh, and I might as well say what the course is about. It's called How to Set Boundaries Without Feeling Like an Asshole. And boundaries are a huge thing that survivors of narcissistic abuse struggle with. So I struggled with it too. And I worked through it on my own, and I figured out how to incorporate doing my own emotional work with setting boundaries. And therefore, I created a course on it. So if you want to snag that, go for it and do it before Sunday at midnight, because you're going to save 50%. But if you like to pay full price, you can wait. That's up to you. So yeah, just thought I would throw that all out there. And now I will get to the point of this episode of how I figured out that my mother was a narcissist. So this is actually, it's kind of a long story. But I'm going to go through it as much to the point as possible, but I'm sure I will have some rambling, but I like to call that wisdom nuggets, because every time I feel like I'm rambling about something, there's always somebody who is like, oh my God, when you said this in your podcast, that is what made it click. So I am going to call my rambling like just throwing even more wisdom nuggets out there, because who knows who that is going to help. So yeah, let me get started. So it was 2014 when I first realized my mother was a narcissist. Now, before this, I knew we had a very volatile relationship, and it was not normal how much we fought, because, as I started to get older, I started to see how my friends interacted with their parents and whatnot. And I realized hey, so I'm the only one who gets yelled at this much. So it started clicking in that something was wrong. But I had this massive belief that what was wrong with me. I had a problem communicating with people, or, the common denominator is me. And am I crazy? Is there something wrong with me? Why do I go through this and other people don't? So I really kind of thought I was the issue. Um, So, which, I know that's very common in a lot of people who have narcissistic parents. Like, you think you're the problem because you were a bad kid or whatever. And, I just thought I was like a really terrible child growing up. And really, I wasn't. Like, I was as obedient as I possibly could be because I was terrified of being yelled at, which was what happened very often. But anyways, so yeah, I guess we could even say 2012 it kind of started too, because I moved out for 2 weeks that year, and got guilted into going back home, lost first and last month's rent. So that was a fun time. Um, yeah, I also had a horrific therapy experience when that all went down, which I think, you know what? If I say it on the podcast, it's going to force me to create the episode. And it's an episode that I have been meaning to make, but terrified to make, about my personal experience with traditional therapy, counseling, psychiatry, etc. Because I think a lot of professionals, no offense, but there's a lot that don't know about narcissistic abuse. And then you end up kind of staying stuck in a toxic dynamic because it confirms that you think you're crazy and you're the one with the problem and you're the one who needs to do the work into saving the relationship, or, the family relationship between mother and daughter. Like, it was, yeah. I'm going to talk about it one day. Maybe it'll be the next solo episode I do. I don't know. But I think it's something that does need to be talked about because, therapy is seen as like the be all and end all when it comes to healing. Not by everyone, but a lot of like mainstream stuff. And, I, you know, not bashing therapists. I'm not shit talking them. I'm just speaking based on my own experience. And I know that there are people out there who have amazing therapists who have been able to heal with their therapist, and that's awesome. That is awesome. I'm not discounting that whatsoever. It's just going to be my personal experience. And I know it's the experience of a lot of other people who have suffered from narcissistic abuse, because it's one thing to understand it like from a textbook, like what narcissistic abuse is, but until you've actually lived it, like, I think there's like another layer of complete understanding when it comes to actually having been through it, and you can actually empathize with the person who is coming to you for help. But whatever, I will talk more about that on that episode whenever I grow the balls to release it. But I'm sure that's going to happen soon because I have grown the balls to do this episode now. So, I'm going to keep talking. So yeah, all this stuff happened in my life, whatever, 2014. We're going to start there. I feel like this has just been so convoluted, but the thing with sharing stories about narcissistic abuse is that like it starts, you don't really have a starting point for it, because like it starts in the womb really when it comes to your parents, and there's all these like other parts of the story that like seem like they're necessary to have the person who's listening understand. So and it's funny because I've spoken to other survivors who like they have the exact same issue when it comes to telling one story. It turns into like an hour-long discussion because there's so many moving pieces, because that is just the web that narcissists create that add to the story and really give it like the bigger picture of it. But it's just so convoluted, and they do it on purpose. Like, they absolutely do it on purpose to try and look good, because it's like, oh, well, maybe you misunderstood this, and that. But once you reach a certain point in understanding, it's like about narcissistic abuse and that the person you're dealing with is a narc. There's no more room for the benefit of the doubt or for playing devil's advocate, because like that this person's doing it on purpose, and abuse is done on purpose. I don't give a fuck what anybody else says. If like abuse is always a choice. It's always a choice. I don't give a flying fuck how much trauma somebody has been through. It does not give them an excuse to abuse. And my argument for that is that I have been through a fuckload of trauma or other people have also been through a fuckload of trauma and they know better than to be narcissistically abusive towards other people. Okay. And this goes for other crimes as well. Like, if we look at a murderer, do we give a fuck what they've been through? No, we give a fuck about the fact that they killed somebody. And that's fucked up and that's not okay. And let's not have this person be in society. And I don't think anyone with a rational mind has like compassion for murderers, you know? Same thing for rapists. Like, we're not going to go around and telling sexual abuse survivors to start forgiving their rapists. So why is narcissistic abuse the exception? That's just all I'm going to say on that. Anyways, back to my story that I'm going to finally start. So 2014, I was in the midst of a breakup with a narcissistic man. Don't even really want to call him a man, but whatever. So it was like the day after Valentine's Day, of course, because, you know, that's, I don't know, there's just like this pattern of like, I've heard so many stories of people breaking up with narcissists on, after, or right before Valentine's Day, which is super interesting. So if that resonates with anyone, then that's a great detail of the story. But if not, then it's just an irrelevant date, whatever. And the way that this relationship played out, yes, I said relationship because it was a relationship. It was very textbook and it was very short. It was like just a couple of months, like 4 or 5 months or something like that. Like, it was not a very long term relationship at all. But there was the love bombing stage. And I didn't really feel like dating anybody at the time. I was very much like, you know, I'm just going to kind of see what's out there and just chill. Like, I don't really want to get into anything serious. So, of course, when you say that to a narcissist, that becomes their ultimate goal, to get what they can't have. So this guy, he did such a great job love bombing me, and like the soulmate effect and all that bullshit, like twin flame, like stupidity, all that happened. And I fell for the trap because I didn't even know that I was going into a trap, right? So anyone who is coming out of a narcissistic abuse relationship, like, you didn't know what you were getting yourself into. So try not to beat yourself up. Easier said than done, I know, but I just hope that me sharing my experience with this as well, like, will help you to not beat yourself up so much for not knowing, because you don't know what you don't know. So I decided to Google his behavior because he came on so strong at the beginning. And then, you know, like the first month was like just amazing. It was like perfect bliss, honeymoon phase, wonderful. And then the mask started to slowly come off. And towards the end was when I started noticing like the devalue stage. So, you know, all of a sudden we had less things in common, or, you know, all of a sudden the way I did my hair was not the way he wanted me to. Like, just little things, like just slowly chipping away at like my self-confidence and whatnot. And then we went to a party one time and he like made a comment about the girls at the party, that like they were kind of all over him or whatever, but they really weren't. But like, I guess he was trying to make me feel jealous or something, or like trying to show me that like he has other options or whatever the hell he was trying to do. And this was like a week before the breakup, pretty much. So, you know, it's pretty obvious he got other supply, because then the discard phase happened and I actually never heard back from him, which is great. But some narcissists do come back after they discard you. It's hit and miss, and it depends on a lot of factors. But so he basically, we were talking on the phone. It was the day after Valentine's Day, and he said he only saw me as a friend all of a sudden. And I was like, oh, okay, so are we breaking up? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, cool. So I was fucking devastated, of course, because he like really had me believing that we had a future together, and he was talking marriage, he was talking moving out together. And I did want to get out of my mom's house at that time too, because like she was just driving me crazy. Didn't really know she was a narcissist just yet, though. Um, and this is why this story matters for why I figured it out. So I was like fucking confused as shit. So heartbroken and confused. And my confusion stemmed from he was the one who pursued me. He was the one who did everything in his power to convince me to start dating him, to convince me that we had a future, to convince me of everything that, I wanted for my life, or I thought I wanted for my life at the time, right? So it was just like this knight in shining armor thing. And then all of a sudden, you want nothing to do with me anymore, like after such a short time. And his biggest complaint was like, oh, I just don't feel the butterflies anymore. And it's like, okay, like the butterflies go away. Like, you know, um, when you're like into a 5-year relationship, like it does not feel the same as like the beginning of a relationship, and that's just kind of how it goes. Like the butterflies are very overrated, I think, and narcissists, like it really matters to them, or like it was just his excuse, like whatever. So I was just like, okay, how could someone just all of a sudden lose feelings after all that, after just the effort he went through? So I just started Googling the behavior because I was like, what the fuck? Like, is it normal for a guy to pursue you like crazy and then all of a sudden you're nothing to him? Like, that's kind of what I was Googling. And that's when I came across narcissists. And I had no idea what narcissist meant. Like, I really thought it was someone who spent a lot of time in the mirror. And, like I still am very much into like hair, makeup, and all that kind of stuff. Cause, my mom was a hairdresser and I learned how to do all that at a very young age. So it was an interest and still is an interest for me to this day. So I just thought that was narcissism, right? And it's not. That's just being vain. And you can be vain and still be a decent person, and you can be vain and not be a narcissist. So just wanted to throw that out there for anyone else who might be worried that they might be a narcissist, because they might also be vain. But like, I'm not vain to the point where I'm like staring in the mirror, just like, no, like I just enjoy putting makeup on. I enjoy doing my hair. It makes me feel better than looking like shit. But that's just me. And again, that's probably rooted in some kind of childhood trauma, but does it like affect my day-to-day life every single day 24/7? No, not really. Like, it's not a big deal. Anyways, so I realized what the definition of a narcissist is. So that was extraordinarily eye-opening. So I went down the Google rabbit hole and I got even more information because it was just so validating that, like, hold on, is it not me this time? Right? Because I just thought it was always me. I thought something was always wrong with me throughout my entire life, that, I just couldn't relate to people or whatever, right? So it just started all making sense. And the other thing I started noticing was that previous relationships followed a very, very similar pattern of love bombing, devalue, discard. And some of them, it was the pattern of like the discard is where they start acting like a complete horrible person so that you're the one who ends up breaking up with them. And that's something that narcissists do because they just can't be honest, and they just, it's weird. So it was just super, super interesting that I was noticing that, oh my God, almost all my relationships have been like this, with the exception of a few. And then I went further down the Google rabbit hole and came across an article about narcissistic mothers. Now, I wasn't really seeking out this information. It just sort of popped up somehow. I think just with all the stuff I was clicking on, and it shows you like related articles and stuff like that. So out of curiosity, I decided to read an article about narcissistic mothers and what the signs are. And that's where my brain exploded. And I realized, holy shit, my mother's a narcissist. What the fuck? Right? So I was just like completely mind blown, completely like just shocked. And I immediately, like a few days later, I don't think it was like right after I read the article. I think, I spent a little while digesting the information that I read. So at this point, I was already like, okay, cool. Like the relationship part, I get it. I know what the signs are. I know what to look out for. I know what the red flags are. Awesome. And, I kind of got over that relationship pretty quickly and decided to just take, I took a solid 10 months to myself, which was great. And I kind of did these experiments where like I would go on dates with people just to understand their behavior and see if I could sniff out a narcissist. And, I recommend doing that if you're in a place where like you're not going to be influenced by these people to get into a relationship. So, you know, take that as you will. If that is something you want to do, go for it. If you don't think you're ready to do that because you think that you might fall for the wrong person, don't fucking do it. Okay. Do the inner work first and then do it if you really need that confirmation. But I think that was part of like my healing at that time because I didn't know what healing was at that time. But I think just like education was very healing for me during that stage of my life and my journey. So, yeah, just a little interesting tidbit of my life there. And so yeah, I was very much like whatever about like narcissistic men, understanding the relationship aspects, whatever. Found my husband at the end of 2014 and we lived happily ever after. So, you're not doomed to repeating the cycle just because you're not a perfectly healed unicorn is the point that I want to make from that. Cause I didn't even, I did some yoga and meditation at the time and all that kind of stuff, but like never any like actual inner excavating my repressed emotions. And that's where like the real healing began. But, the other happy part of that is that my husband stuck with me through all that as well, even though he had no idea what I was really going through and didn't really have the same experience with his family because his family's amazing. They're normal people. They're wonderful. So there are great people out there who exist. So if you're, coming out of a breakup with a narc, I just want you to know that normal people exist. They will have your back. They might not necessarily be able to empathize and validate you in the way you want to be validated because they have never been through it. But they're still going to be there for you if they love you. And that's exactly what my husband did. And that's amazing. So there is hope. Okay. And, the validation and all that and empathy comes from you giving that to yourself and doing your inner work, which I discovered. So that's what I'm here sharing. So all my previous episodes, I'm sure I talk about doing the inner emotional work. So feel free to refer to those if you want more details on that. So yeah, I figured out the stuff about my mom. And I think that was like more shocking than the relationships. Cause like the relationships, it's like, if you don't share kids or anything with somebody, like you can make a pretty clean break and never see that person again and, make new friends if you have to, and it's all good. But like your family, when something's wrong with a family member, especially someone as close to you as your mother, who for me at that time, she was my only family member because, being a narcissist and all, she alienated everybody else. So I don't really know my cousins. I don't really know my uncles or anything like that from like that side of the family. Like I don't know these people. I don't have a relationship with them. And that's because she alienated them in general, because I guess people started to see through who she was. So, that was the only family I had. So for me, it was kind of like, okay, well, if I don't have my mom, then I don't really have anyone. So I promptly put my head back up my ass and decided to be in denial about my mother. Okay. And I decided to hold on to some kind of hope that maybe she'll change, or maybe she'll see the error of her ways, or maybe if I just, modify my own behavior, I will be able to deal with her. And, she probably deep down still loves me. All the shit we lie to ourselves about when we find out we have a narcissistic mother. So I absolutely did that. And then I just kind of ignored that fact until the end of 2015. So this was like a year and a half or a bit more that had gone by until this started to confront me again, that my mother was a narcissist. And, just her behavior, like I started just noticing more and more that this woman's toxic, this woman's completely fucked up, and probably should have never had children. Like, let's be real. not fit to be a mother. And I started understanding a little more of my childhood. And back, you know, like I mentioned, which I'm sure this is true for you when you speak about narcissistic people, the story jumps around in multiple different places. So I'm going to go back to 2014 now because this part of the story is coming up, that I had this random moment in January of 2014 where I needed to forgive my father for some reason. And I didn't really know why. I was just kind of following my intuition, and I just had this feeling. And it was telling me, Adriana, forgive your father, forgive your father, forgive your father. So I was like, okay, fuck, fine. I'll forgive my father. So I messaged my half brother. So I have two half brothers from my dad from his first marriage. And I was kind of in contact with them, but like we weren't super close or anything. But like my thing was like, I just never wanted to have contact with my father because I thought he was a monster. Because my mother told me horrible things about him growing up. And little did I realize at the time that like my half brothers and, those aunts and uncles from that side of the family, they were trying to like let me know that my dad wasn't such a bad guy, but I wasn't really having it. So it was just like, every time I would interact with them, it would be like kind of like a World War III erupting because my mother would be included in these conversations, of course. So everyone would just be screaming at each other, and I didn't really understand what was going on. So I just decided, like, I am Switzerland. I am neutral in all of this. And I still am not going to talk to my father, and you guys and my mother can fight if you want to, but I'm just going to stay out of this. That was like my thing. Um, if only I knew. And like, I guess that side of my family, they didn't really have a name for narcissistic abuse. Even though they tried to warn me in whatever ways they could safely do so, because my mom made a lot of roadblocks for me and them to communicate like one-on-one. So it was, and I was afraid of them too because they were related to my father. So that also helped my mother's agenda. So yeah, I had this random moment of I must forgive my father. So I emailed him and I was like, hey, I forgive you for abandoning me. um, and that's all I have to say, really. Like, it was just a very like to the point whatever. And he came back with, oh my God, I've been waiting for this moment for such a long time. Like, let's talk on the phone. And I shut him down right away. I was like, no. I said what I needed to say. Enjoy the rest of your life. I forgive you. I don't resent you anymore. And I've got nothing else. And that's it. So, I just set that boundary right away and put that wall up because I still didn't believe that my mom was the issue. So of course, once I realized like what narcissistic abuse was a few months later, I was like, okay, so maybe this is like more of like why they divorced and all that. But I still felt like he abandoned me, which was the narrative that I had learned my entire life, that, he abandoned me. He didn't pay for child support, this, that, and the other. He's a horrible person. He never wanted you. He doesn't care about you, blah, blah, blah. And that couldn't have been farther from the truth, but that was what I believed. And, parental alienation is part of my story of how I figured out my mom was a narcissist. So this is a very important part of the story. And this might not resonate with everybody, but I'm sure this resonates with some people that, I was absolutely brainwashed as a kid into hating my father, into thinking he was like this demonic, horrendous person who could do no right. And my mom was like this perfect, wonderful angel who never did anything wrong in her life. And she just got dealt a really, bad deal in life, and poor her. And like, we just have to feel sorry for her. And she was like a strong, independent single mother. And she did the job of a father and a mother. And she also took care of her own mother who had a stroke. And I guess that's another story too. Because I was very much neglected a lot because my mom was focusing a lot on my grandmother after she had her stroke. And then there's more to that story, which kind of has to do with the legal stuff that I am dealing with right now, the legal mess that my mom created that I get to clean up, that I can't exactly speak about right this second. So once that is all settled, I will probably go through a phase of needing to build up the courage to talk about it. But I will, and that will start helping things to make more sense with more of my story that I share. But anyways, where was I going with this? Is the parental alienation? Yes. This is so unscripted, so I hope like this is enjoyable for people because I just kind of, when I do my solo episodes, it's just kind of like I just talk and whatever comes out comes out. And maybe I wasn't intending on sharing this much or, whatever, but here we are. And it's funny because this is the second time I'm recording this episode because the first time I was like, oh my God, I'm sharing way too much. And now I feel the exact same way that I'm sharing way too much. But you know what? I think I've worked through enough of that fear in the past couple of days of deleting the initial episode that I don't care. I'm just going to throw this out there and it's all good. So yeah, parental alienation, my father. Yes, there's a point to this. So yeah, I thought my dad was an absolute monster. And it was 2015 where I started talking to him a little more because I started figuring her out a little more. And so like poor guy, my dad, like poor guy. Maybe I'll see if he's open to me interviewing him on my podcast one day because that should be a very interesting discussion. Just an idea right now, no promises. But yeah, so I thought he was like this horrible person, and he said something kind of cryptic to me one day in 2015 that made me open to wanting to talk to him. And it had to, I'm not going to get into details about like the conversation that we had, but it had to do with child support and like the fact that, I should have gotten more money than what I think I got or whatever, or like my mom got. Like it was very cryptic and it made no sense. So that really sparked my curiosity even more. And I decided to actually have my first phone conversation with him in January 2016, where he told me that he did, in fact, pay for child support. And my mom's narrative was that he never paid for child support. And, he tried to get away with it, like in a really shady way, where it like kind of looked like he did, but it was her money that it was supposed to be or whatever. So I was just like, flabbergasted because when he told me this, I believed him because I knew he was telling me the truth. Like that's what my intuition was telling me. But my narrative of what I knew was like, no way. Like, no way, this didn't happen. He's full of shit. Like, there's no way. So what I did was I waited for my mom to go grocery shopping one day and I went through her documents in her drawer, and she was a bit of a hoarder and never threw anything out. And when I actually cleaned out her house for selling it after she passed away, oh my God, like there was shit, like receipts from like 1970 and stuff like that. Like part of me feels like I should have kept some of it as like a vintage thing and I could have like sold like, this memorabilia from back in the day, but like I just wanted to get rid of everything. So I'm glad I did that. But so of course the divorce papers were with her documents. So I went through them and then I found the custody settlement, and it actually was true that he also had custody of me and she was supposed to give him access to me. And if she didn't, he would have had to come with police officers. And so she technically didn't actively say, no, you can't see your father. The way she went about it was she brainwashed me into hating him so much that I feared him and I was terrified of seeing him. So I refused to see him as a child. And I'm pretty glad that he chose not to go the police route to see me because that would have probably traumatized me even more. But poor guy, honestly. So yeah, I found the truth and I found the child support document as well. And he paid her out for her portion of the house, and I found that document. So that was all good. And then there was another fund for me for child support. And she was entitled to take out like, a certain amount per month. And then when I turned 18, I was supposed to receive whatever was left over with all the interest that that fund had accrued. Well, I didn't receive fuck all because, so in the documents that I found, there's actually a document with my signature on it on my 18th birthday, signing over the money to her. And when you're 18 and your mother tells you to sign a document and you don't know what it is because she doesn't tell you what it is, but you trust her because you're 18 years old and you're still relatively young and technically an adult, but not really. And your mom tells you to sign something and you trust her, you're going to sign it. So I signed it. And so she basically took all that money, and it was not that much money, but it would have been a great amount of money for me to, start my life off, pay for university or something. But that went to her. And the other funny thing about that fund was I went through it and she was making other transactions that had nothing to do with taking care of me. So that was interesting too. So it was just like she was just all about money and like trying to get as much money as possible, not giving a fuck who she screwed over. So that pissed me off quite a bit because there were so many things that could have been different in my life if I had that money. And the other part that pissed me off about it too was that she actually took all my paychecks when I was working. So I never really had access to my own money in general until I moved out, really, because before that, I decided to be smart when I was like 22 or 23 and I got my own bank account for the first time because I was starting to get pissed that I had a job. I had a part-time job throughout university and making decent money. Like I was bartending, so I was making good tips and stuff, and I would just deposit them into the bank account because it's not good to have all this cash at home because what if someone breaks in, the paranoia they instill in you. And it didn't occur to me that, so it eventually did occur to me that I had like a bunch of my tips saved up from my bartending job that I decided, like, I realized I don't want her to have this, so I'm going to make my own fucking bank account. I'm of age, I don't need her. She doesn't need to know about it, like whatever. So I made my own secret bank account. She found out about it. She yelled at me every day for 3 years. Like I'm not even exaggerating. And that was when she started charging me rent because she wasn't getting access to my paychecks anymore. So she's already financially handicapped me. And now I'm trying to save up so that I can actually move out on my own. And she's charging me enough rent to the point where I'm just going to break even and not have enough money to, no way in hell did I ever have enough money to buy a place, but enough money for first and last month's rent. So we're talking like a measly couple $1,000s, like up to $3,000, right? For what rent was costing at the time to put a down payment on the first and last and all the security and all that shit. I couldn't even save that because she was charging me ridiculous amounts of money for rent. And she would actually, to the point where she was taking the grocery bills and at month end dividing those up. And I didn't even eat at home. Like I made it a point to be out as much as possible while I was under her roof. So I guess like unconsciously I knew like stay the fuck away from her as much as I could. And I would go out to eat. So like when I was working, right? Like I would, maybe have a granola bar for breakfast and then I would go out for lunch during my lunch break, like people in the corporate world tend to do, right? That's what I would do. And then for dinner, I would probably go out with friends. Like I was very much not home very often. So it started to piss me off that she would charge me for these groceries that I wasn't even eating. So it's just like petty shit like that, right? That like gets you to react. And then you realize over time, like, oh my God, I have been financially fucked by this person. Oh my God. And I'm telling you, the rent that she was charging me was like not even, it was more than what I would have had to pay if I just had my own place. So it wasn't even fair amounts of rent. It was like ridiculous. And I get like, adult children who live at home, like they should contribute to the bills and all that. But this was like ulterior motive of like financially handicap her so she can't leave. So that was why, I did make a decision to put myself into a bit of debt so that I could leave because I just couldn't take it anymore. And I did move out and I didn't give a fuck how much debt I would be in, how long it would take me to pay this off. I just needed to get the fuck out of there. And it was the best decision I ever made in my life, moving out. So, you know, I'm not the type of person who gives financial advice on this because that's not my forte whatsoever. But whatever, we're all going to have debt, right? So if that's what you're worried about when it comes to moving out, like just look at it like it's something that I'm going to pay off later. And this is for my sanity right now. And I'm making a choice that my sanity is more important than money at this time. And as long as you're still able to like make your payments for rent, right? Like if you have like a steady salary, like you're all good. You're just going to be in a bit of debt for like that first and last month rent or whatever it is. And you can still put food on the table. You can still, whatever. If you have to find a roommate, like so be it, right? Just make sure they're not narcissistic. But get the fuck out of that environment. And the money is replaceable. Okay. Money is always replaceable. Your sanity, your mental health, your emotional health is, not replaceable. And it's probably something that has been tarnished by a narcissist. And you can heal from it because if I was able to, so can you. It's just going to take work, right? So the sooner you're out of that environment, the sooner you can go deeper on your healing journey and see things with more clarity. And you might even, be able to think of another way that you can make more money so that you can afford to live on your own or, away from the narcissistic person. But when you're in that ball of confusion, you're fucked. Like you're not going to be able to make rational decisions. And, maybe you're working in a job where they're not paying you enough and they don't see your worth because you don't even see your worth. But when you get yourself out of that situation and you start seeing your worth, right? That's going to put a fire under your ass to realize, oh my God, I should apply to a different job and get something that's better paying because I'm worthy of it, right? And you don't have to stay in that toxic work environment or that shit paying job because you do have skills and you're a great person who can get a better paying job and you don't have to limit yourself to that or, you could get a side hustle or whatever it is, right? That's going to be the extent of the financial advice I give. Because, like I know everyone's situation is different, but I hope this is speaking to whoever needs to hear it that, you are worth more and your sanity, you can't put a price on it. And if it's not going to cause you to live on the streets, to get the fuck out of there, sometimes living on the streets might even be better, honestly. Like you'll have more peace of mind. But, you make your own choice on that, of course. But like do what you have to do to get the fuck out as soon as possible. Like I wish that I had stayed out in 2012 when I initially moved out, but that was not part of my journey, right? Like I regretted moving back in because I felt guilty. But at the same time, I didn't know how toxic my mother was. I didn't know that she was sabotaging me. And yeah, that is in a nutshell how I figured it all out. That was such a long story. I was not expecting this to be that long, but I know this is going to help people. So yeah, Cole's Notes version, dated a narcissist, broke up with him, Google rabbit hole, realized all this other shit and figured out that financial abuse is part of narcissistic abuse, figured out my dad wasn't such a bad guy after all. We do have a relationship now, which is great. I'm glad I found out before it would be too late, Some people are not so fortunate. So I am really grateful that I managed to get into contact with him when I did. And yeah, I hope, I don't know how to end this, to be honest. Like, how do I even conclude this story? What a shit show is all I have to say. And I really do hope this story helps people. And I know it's going to help people. And again, any of my resources that you want to get your hands on, I will put that link in these notes. And, I just hope that if anything, you can recognize like parts of your story and my story and understand that, you know, if I was able to heal and get to the point where I'm at right now, like there's so much hope that you can too, right? It's a matter of doing the hard thing, recognizing that it's hard and just doing it anyways and doing whatever it takes to get to that point where, healing is possible. And the healing journey doesn't end. I'm still doing healing work. And any healer or coach or whatever who tells you that they're not, like they're full of shit and they're not actually doing the work because it's a lifestyle change. It is part of your journey. It just becomes part of who you are, like doing the inner work. And it only benefits you and it helps you to, like, what are the words I'm looking for? And I say this all the time too. It enables you to handle whatever else life throws at you because as long as you're a living, breathing human, life is going to continue throwing shit at you. Life doesn't give a fuck, your circumstances and the situations that you go through in your life, like they don't care. They're not going to say like, oh, Adriana's not ready for this yet. Like let's hold off on like this life event. No, it's going to fucking happen whether you like it or not. And if you've done some inner work, you're going to be able to better handle it. If you haven't, you're going to go back into those loops of confusion and despair and all that. And, it's part of the journey, right? Like there was a time in my journey where I was just in complete victim mode. And, I don't blame anyone for staying in that victim mode because like you don't know what the fuck to do. But I'm telling you, there's stuff to do. Like there are things you can do to not be in that mode. And if you want to take that as an opportunity to do the inner work, amazing, right? If you're not ready for that yet, you're not ready for that yet, right? But the thing is, it's possible. It's possible to heal and you don't have to be in that mode forever. You can become a survivor and a thriver, right? It's not all about surviving. It's about thriving and you've survived already. It's time to empower yourself. So I hope this helps and I hope that this was taken in a loving way and not in a scolding way because that's not how I meant it at all. This could just be my inner critic talking here. But yeah, I am going to end this recording here. I feel like this was very detailed and very helpful for people. So yeah, look forward to more solo episodes of me sharing more of my story. And I do hope that this has been helpful. So yeah, we'll see you next time on The Shift Show. Bye.